And joining me is a man who is no stranger. We have interviewed quite a lot of people, and he's one of them. Let me say a pleasant good evening, pleasant Sunday good evening to Kiel Taklalsingh, attorney at law. How are you, sir?
I am good. Good afternoon to you, and good afternoon to your listeners.
Yes, and viewers. Always good to have you.
And the viewers, yep.
Good. It's been a while. You made it quite clear that you support the Stand Your Ground law proposed by Prime Minister Kamala Persad-Bissessar and the UNC administration. A measure designed to protect citizens in their homes and to ensure the law does not second-guess decisions made under extreme duress. Now, many people have weighed in on this, and I think she has made it quite clear. Listen, if you have a problem with it, then simply don't go out there and try to get anything to defend yourself. I mean, it's your choice. What say you? Give us from your perspective. Tell us why you support it.
Well, first of all, that last sentiment is somewhat correct, because at the end of the day, one of the points I also make is that this is a matter that we're not sneaking in. The UNC isn't sneaking in about it. It was front and center of its political campaign. It's not as though, it's not like the Petrotrin issue where the former government suddenly closed down Petrotrin. This is something that the UNC campaigned on. Ms. Persad-Bissessar was quite colorful even in her language, in the way she described a citizen and his right to defend himself and his property. And therefore, it should take us by no surprise that this would be one of the first legislative measures that the government is going to go forward with. In a democracy, we can have different views about policy and legislative enactments. What we can't disagree about in a democracy is the way in which we decide those issues. One of the ways we decide those issues is by an election. This matter was on the ticket. It was front and center of the United National Congress's campaign, and therefore any move to enact Stand Your Ground law is certainly one that has democratic legitimacy. I fully support this measure because I think there has to be an adjustment in the self-defense law when it comes to a citizen and his home. We could have reasonable debates as to whether it should be extended in public spaces. But certainly, when it comes to the home, I am of the view that no one should judge me as to whether or not I take reasonable action to defend myself. No one should judge me as to whether or not I should be proportionate in the amount of force that I can use to repel an attacker. And no one should expect of me that if someone enters my home to do harm to me or my family, that I should even contemplate retreating or running. That should never be a consideration. I am entitled to defend my home with full force.
Yeah, and you go on to say that the idea that a homeowner must behave reasonably during a home invasion is absurd. Reason is a luxury. Terror, chaos, and adrenaline are not conducive to legal analysis. The only reasonable objective is to live. And I want to agree with you, my friend, 100%. Yes, that sense of survival, that is something that kicks in. I mean, let's be honest here. Someone coming into your home to invade your space, to invade the space of your family, you are not a mind reader, you're not a psychic, you don't know, the intentions is not to just open your refrigerator, make a sandwich, and leave. They're coming in, and they're coming in for what belongs to you, your possessions, and it's not that many times they're simply going to just take that and leave. Someone can be sexually assaulted, someone can be hurt, someone can be killed. There's no way to determine that because, again, you don't have time to click and just make a psychological analysis of what's going on. Your space is being invaded and they're coming for you and your loved ones.
Exactly. I mean, I have had the unfortunate experience, while it did not end up in a confrontation, but I was at home when someone broke into my house. I was aware. And I can tell you, it's a fear that paralyzes you. It's a fear that, you can think of nothing else but surviving and securing yourself and securing your loved ones. So I don't know how on earth someone can expect you to act, quote unquote, reasonably, and especially where that reasonability has to be judged with hindsight in the precincts of a court or a police station or before a judge in chambers. That should not be the case. It should be that it is presumed that once I decide to defend my family, that should be in the law, that it is presumed. In law you have presumptions. It should be a presumption that as long as someone enters my home to do harm to myself or my family, then it is presumed that once I defend them to the fullness of my ability, I am acting reasonably. No one should judge that by any other standard. And I really can't think of any logical argument to the contrary when it comes to your home. I remember, now I listened to the PNM press conference some time ago, with all due respect, and I heard Mr. Al-Rawi, former Attorney General, saying, well, the law might be applied unequally. I have no idea what he meant by that, none at all. The only equality I am concerned with is putting myself on equal footing with someone who's breaking in my home. And I should have the equal right to do him as much harm as I see fit if he's coming into my home to harm me or my family. There was another issue they raised about, well, how do you define where the area is that you're going to pass this, or where's your home? I think it's quite easy and obvious for anyone to define where their living space is, where their home is, and the common law and the law of England and UK and Europe and everywhere for hundreds of years. There's centuries of jurisprudence as to what is trespass law and what is home and boundary and land boundaries and that sort of thing. So that should be no problem to put in the legislation. There is simply no real legal, moral, or logical argument as to why this law should not be enacted to protect homeowners.
Well, there are many who seem to have a liberal perspective on it, in the sense that after the fact, and this is all after the fact, yes, that when it does settle, say, listen, this young man came into your home, he came from a broken home, he came from an area that is definitely, you know, geographically underfunded, it's not developed. He didn't have the best schooling, he wasn't academically inclined, and these are things that come after the fact. And you yes, hear this from people who are now saying that, you know, this standing ground law isn't good. But again, when someone again steps into your home, you only have a few seconds to make an assessment. When you're talking now about social issues that may have brought this young person or whoever it is to commit a crime where they can start believing that they can invade your space, then whose yes, responsibility is that?
Yes, and you know, I am one who respects the sanctity of life, just as everyone else, and I'm sure Ms. Prasad Bisasa and the entire UNC does. But at the end of the day, we have a real problem in Trinidad and Tobago where home invasions are rising and rising and rising. It's been happening for too long. And what do? We know, and it is accepted, that when you make alterations in legislation, it has the ability to change societal behavior. And it would send a signal to persons who are thinking about or planning doing some type of home invasion, that look, if I break in that house, there's no reasonability. The UNC has empowered citizens with, one, more liberal access to FULs, because that is a stated policy, and two, that in someone's home, they can shoot and kill and not be prosecuted. So if I go inside that house, I could die. You therefore assume the risk. And insofar as we talk about the social circumstances of a person, yes, we are sympathetic to that. But what about the social circumstances to the ones you love, the ones you want to protect, the ones that you want to live with for the rest of your life? What about that? Doesn't that count for anything? Isn't that something that we should consider both before the fact, during the incident, and after the fact? I'm sorry, I have very little sympathy for someone who comes into your home to do harm and to rob, to rape, or to pillage. And if you meet consequences which ends your life, well, that is a risk that you took, and so be it.
Yeah, now you have individuals, of course, weighing in on this, looking at Florida's legal framework.
Yes.
And the key provisions of the Florida statute include, number one, no duty to retreat. A person who is not engaged in an unlawful activity and is in a place where they have a right to have no duty to retreat before yes, using force in yes, self-defense.
Yes.
Two, the use of deadly force. Deadly
Yes.
force is justified if the person reasonably believes it is necessary to prevent imminent death or great bodily harm to themselves or others, or to prevent a forcible felony.
Yes.
3. Presumption of reasonableness in home or vehicle. The law presumes that a person has a reasonable fear of death or great bodily harm if an intruder unlawfully and forcibly enters their home, dwelling, or occupied vehicle. The defender knew or had reason to believe that this unlawful entry was occurring. And that's just 3 there. What say
Exactly.
you?
Well, exactly. The third one is what I spoke about. There should be a presumption of fear in reasonability once the person. So if you're out in public, someone approaching you, you may say, look, let's assess the circumstances. But when you're home asleep, someone breaks in your door. I remember Sergeant Alexander, I keep saying Sergeant Alexander, Minister Alexander now, when he gave that depiction at the postcard press conference, where he took off the lights and he said, that was very chilling. That is chilling, and that is what happens, right? So in those circumstances, shouldn't it be reasonably presumed that you are in fear for your life and you will act? Of course. And in terms of a duty to retreat, strictly speaking, even the common law now doesn't say you have a duty to retreat. But what it does say is that retreat is something the court will consider whether you could have retreated. And in that regard, it is somewhat akin to a duty to retreat. So what we say is there should be nothing about retreat. There should be no expectation at all. That should be the policy for stand your ground law. There should be no expectation of me retreating when someone breaks in my home. It should not be considered at all when one is considering reasonability. And that is fair enough. I think that is clear enough, and we can clarify that. Whether or not we want to get into debates, academic debates as to whether there is or isn't a duty, let's clarify it. Let us say there is nothing to do with retreat. Nobody either expects you to retreat, or there is no duty to retreat if someone enters your home to do harm to you or your family.
Now, immunity from prosecution is number 4. Those
Yes.
who use force under the law are immune from criminal prosecution and
Yes.
civil action unless the force used is determined to be unlawful. Number 5, exceptions. The law does not apply if the person using force was engaged in unlawful activity. The
Yes.
person against whom the force was used had a legal right to be in the location, and there's no restraining order or similar legal action. The person using force provoked the use of force unless they withdrew and the other party continued attacking. I think that's
Yes.
fair. I think that makes sense.
And that is very clear, very, very understandable to all, and it makes the appropriate exception. So you can't invite someone in your house and then claim stand your ground, right? I mean, I think that's obvious, and that should be a carved out exception. That person isn't an intruder, even if he doesn't become an intruder, right? So I think the exceptions are very clear. We don't have to copy it wholesale from Florida. We can make some certain exceptions to Trinidad. I heard someone talking about what about tenanted houses and neighbors and that kind of course we could consider those things and drill down into that type of policy. But simply because crafting the law may require some effort should not prevent us from doing it. Simply because there were some bad experiences in the use of the law or purported use of the law in other jurisdictions does not mean that we in Trinidad and Tobago should not adopt that type of law in order to protect homeowners, which is, to me, crime and home invasions is perhaps one of the biggest issues in our country. So what you can't expect that the UNC, having gotten the overwhelming mandate that it did to get into government, is not going to prioritize and put this legislation as its centerpiece in bringing a better way of life for Trinidad and Tobago.
What do you say to those who weigh in on this matter and they say that, you know, that government has failed to arrest the crime situation, so now they're setting up a framework for vigilantes to go into action?
Well, I mean, I think I could be a vigilante in my house. With all due respect, I think if there's a criminal prowling my house, I'm entitled to be a vigilante. Vigilantism in public is a whole different thing. Nobody expects me, and I don't think anybody should be dressing up like Batman and prowling the street looking to get after criminals, okay? But in your house, totally different story, and that's why the UNC has decided, as far as I could presume, that is what I understand the policy to be, that the UNC is taking steps to ensure that homeowners are well protected, that has nothing to do with vigilantism in my view.
Many are saying, of course, it creates a culture of shoot first and ask questions later. But again, it goes back to the point, someone invading your space is not there to have a conversation with you.
Exactly. They're not there to have a conversation. They're not there to get into debate with you. They enter your home to do harm. And then what happens? Let's say even if they didn't want to harm somebody personally, but they came to take something. What if you get up in the middle of the night and you confront them? Then what happens? Then what happens? Your life is automatically at risk. Your family's life is automatically at risk. It scars you for the rest of your life. You should be able to defend yourself, and you should be able, and we as a society should send a message to those who wish to enter people's homes illegally to do harm, that if you do so, you could lose your life. I can't see a problem with that.
I really can't see a problem there at all. Again, these people don't have any good intentions, and they're coming basically to do the worst of things, perhaps to you and your family. The Attorney General confirmed that, John Jeremy, that the Ministry of National Security has been instructed to assemble a special advisory committee to explore all of this, the feasibility and legal implications of such legislation. Do you believe some people are saying that this is something that should have been done prior, and that the whole idea of it has already bolted out of this table?
No, not at all, because there are precedents, as you just read one out from Florida. There are other precedents around the world where the law is a bit different, but same type of policy, same type of intention to protect homeowners. So when you are in government, you have now the authority of office to engage in full consultation. I mean, for instance, if you were in opposition, you couldn't necessarily engage the DPP officially, engage the judiciary officially, but with ministerial power and office, you can now set up this committee, give them the mandate, let them have public hearings, let them have different types of hearings and private consultation with stakeholders, and let us get a draft quickly before the parliament. Let us get a draft circulated in the public, let comments come, and let us come with the best legislation for the public and to defend homeowners and potential victims of crime, or to prevent crime.
You know, you often hear, especially in North America, where people say, listen, we have a right to bear arms, I mean, to the fact that it's a part of their constitution, but we've never explored, does our constitution give us the right to protect ourselves?
We have a constitutional right to life, and therefore all of the protections that go with that we can assert. We don't have a constitutional right to bear arms in the same way that the Americans have. We do have a legislative right to apply for a firearm, and under the Firearm Act, the test is once you have a good reason to obtain a firearm, the Commissioner of Police ought to grant you one. And I think a good reason is self-defense. A good reason is because you're fearful for crime, and therefore you should be entitled to have a firearm and defend yourself, and with good reason. And therefore there is enough legislative framework to support firearm applications and to defend yourself and to enact this type of law. This law should not, if this law is enacted in the way that it is being articulated by the United National Congress, I can't see it infringing any constitutional rights, and I could in fact see that it supports a constitutional right to life, liberty, and freedom and enjoyment of property and all of those things. So you can make those types of arguments when this legislation is passed, but I can't see any constitutional issue with the legislation that is being drafted to say that it could be struck down, etc. Certainly not.
And looking at the current legislation that exists, one must take in consideration that we are living in an ever-changing global society. Have we outlived many of these laws, Mr. Taklalsingh?
Many. Well, self-defense, the defense of self-defense in law is really a common law defense. We do have, under the Criminal Law Act, a section which says that any person may use reasonable force to prevent a crime, or to prevent a crime, or to make an arrest, so you could have an arrest, or to prevent a crime, but that's about it. So what we really have is called common law over a lot of years, centuries, which has created the rules of self-defense, which has served us well for a period of time. But now facing, and it is entirely normal, where societies face specific problems, that their parliament will consider what legislative changes can be made and or updated in order to meet societal needs. And if home invasions are a problem that we're facing, then it is entirely natural and normal for the parliament, for the political administration of the day to adjust the legislation to ensure that homeowners can protect themselves without any questions. As for a general survey of the law, certainly there are too many outdated laws, sedition, immigration, many acts, the Summary Offences Act, which still outlaw things like selling in our market on Sundays, things like that. All laws that need to be addressed. I am a fan of the Canadian model. They have a criminal code enacted into legislation. Any citizen can go to that code and find every single criminal offense that they may or may not be charged with. I think that it's time we do some type of massive consolidation of our laws to create one criminal code which contains all criminal offenses. I also think that in England there's something called the Police and Criminal Evidence Act, which is actually a piece of law that is designed to protect suspects at police stations. So there are certain legislative rules when you detain someone, when you arrest them, how long you can detain them, how you have to treat them in detention, all of these things. Those things are actually in legislation in England and other jurisdictions. It is common law in Trinidad, but I think we also need to update that so the rules are very clear and that all parties know their rights at different times.
Definitely. Any closing comments? Go right ahead.
No, I just think I wish the United National Congress the best. I think they've hit the ground running and they're doing well. I look forward to the Stand Your Ground law. I certainly am a supporter of it. And and let's see what happens.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. Let's see what happens. But before you go, do you believe that this conversation seems to make a lot of people uncomfortable when you're talking about guns for whatever reason?
Hey, you know what? I have been noticing, not only with guns, but I'm noticing a resistance. I mean, this I don't know if you spoke about it, but this board change issue, that's another issue which I couldn't believe.
Yeah.
It seems like there is almost, someone used the phrase yesterday, corporate filibustering. In America, when you filibuster, you just speak to prevent a bill from passing. There's a type of corporate filibustering going on in Trinidad where boards are attempting, in my view, to stay there to prevent progress and to prevent the UNC from implementing the policies which they promise on the platform in order to ensure good governance. It's wrong. And you could see it, and with all this unreasonable resistance to things like Stand Your Ground law and to things like liberalizing firearms, I just don't get it. These are the things the UNC have campaigned on. You made your case, the UNC made their case, and the election results are overwhelming. Now, that is not to say that you have to stay quiet, not at all. You have freedom of speech. But don't take actions designed to frustrate the United National Congress from implementing their policy. I mean, I have to agree with Anil, perhaps not as flamboyantly as he would often put it in his Douglas politics. But, if you're on a board, you need to resign, you need to go, and you need to allow the UNC to choose their board members to start corporate governance in the state special companies, special purpose companies, because that is where the governance trickles down into the special purpose boards, the RHAs, the other corporate entities, the vehicles which allow governance to take place. You can't stand in the way of the United National Congress now implementing its policy. Come again in 5 years and make your case. That's how a democracy works.
I agree. Again, thank you so much for taking time out this evening, on this Sunday evening, to link with us here. It's been very insightful. Keep up the good work, and we'll be checking in with you periodically to get an update on what's happening. Thank you so much.
Thanks a lot. Good day. Take care.
Yeah. Master Control, what was said by Kamala Prasad-Visesa on this issue? Stand your ground. She made it quite clear. Please run that for me, please.
Now, to stand your ground laws. I think the ongoing debate on this is very, very healthy, on stand your ground law. It helps people to understand the issues. However, we will go through with stand your ground laws as we promised in our campaign. We will do it. Ask yourselves this: why should you have to retreat in your own home? So that's the old law, you retreat. Why should you have to retreat in your own home when you and your family are being threatened? Why should you have to decide between defending your family or not defending your family because you're fearful that you will be prosecuted later. There are frivolous arguments about aiming for the criminal's foot and hand and leg and whatever it may be. That is unrealistic in home invasion situations because you're already so terrified that you will be such a marksman that you could aim for the two. So we will bring the stand your ground laws to defend yourself and your families. I say to citizens, stand your ground legislation is passed. If criminals invade your home, stand your ground for your loved ones. Do not hesitate. Send them straight out to the hospital.
Send them straight out.